G'day Bomber fans, it is that time of the year again. It's the time for reality checks. The Dons were absolutely smashed by the underperforming Cats on the big stage, putting a big old asterisk over our spot in the top 4, big question mark over our legitimacy inside the 8. It was a bad night for us Bomber fans. Today I'll try and piece together just what went wrong for us. Leave your votes down in the comments below if you can find any, with your role player as well. Let's get into the review. The first quarter was a bit of a slog because of the weather. It was really tense footy. You had two teams feeling each other out a bit. Goals were hard to come by for most of it, but when they did come, they felt big. Stringer got on the end of a couple. We went in with a very narrow lead at quarter time. It was looking like a really close game. The second term was a frustrating one. You felt we were starting to waste our chances a bit. Both teams were, to be fair, but it was goal for goal. It was a typical Saturday night blockbuster first half. We went into the break with a 5-point lead. Our forwards were firing. We are typically a fairly strong third quarter team as well, so I had high hopes. That third term was just a mess in every way you look at it. We dominated for periods, only kicked one goal though. The Cats got some really cheap majors that were ultra deflating. We were playing so well at times but had no reward for it. The Cats were just more professional than us, and it was even more frustrating for genuine chances to go to waste because of some poor umpiring decisions, which I will talk about later. I don't think it lost us the match, by the way, like many are saying, but it did feel like the final nail in the coffin in that third quarter. Nothing was going our way at all. It was probably the most frustrating quarter all year, and the final was just a drag. They piled on the goals, got out to a big lead, 45 points in the end. That second half was abysmal. We kicked 2 goals, they kicked 10. It was embarrassing and a huge wake-up call for us and our finals aspirations. We were, for the 6th time in a row, smashed by Geelong. It happens all too often. So let's talk about this game. How did we lose it? Well, it was a game of 2 halves, and not just the first and second period of the game, but just the juxtaposition of a match and 2 very different cultures, I guess. We led this match for 3 minutes less than Geelong. That is wild to me. We were belted off the park when they were up and about, and when we had momentum, it was usually 1 or 2 goals in succession and a whole lot of struggle to hit the scoreboard. Both teams played good footy at stages of this game. That's why we only led for 3 minutes less, but only one was really damaging and really punished the other, and Geelong would just simply put the more mature and more familiar team to this occasion. This game had a finals-like feel to it early, and we were up and about early. We looked better than them, but in a game that ebbs and flows, we simply could not handle Geelong at their best. I think for a good 30 or 40% of the game, we were actually on top. Maybe not that much, but a lot of this match was playing to our hands, and that shows by the fact we almost led for the same amount of time as the Cats. But they played closer to a 4-quarter performance than us. It doesn't matter how competitive you are at times. If you let the other roll over the top of you for the majority of a quarter, you're going to get beaten, especially when that team is Geelong. And this is an issue with us this year. We haven't played many 4-quarter games. Luckily, our draw has been easy enough for that not to be a bother, but against a strong team like Geelong, it clearly was. The Cats did really well to control the ground, which is usually how we like to play our footy. I don't think we were on the back foot, though, because we found territory through stoppages and centre bounces. We were all over them in the guts. Our dual ruck setup worked a treat for stoppages. We managed to repeat entries on multiple occasions, although to no avail. I just think in the end, their defence managed to withstand the heat a lot better than ours, and then rebound really effectively as well. I said that in the preview that the most important zone in this game was defence, when it's usually the midfield. That's what won them the match. We won the midfield battle, but in the end, they were able to contain our forward line and make theirs look a lot more dynamic. It was hard for our defenders to get a hold of the territory they gained, whereas the territory we gained was just meaningless. I think you can excuse bad ball movement on a wet night like Saturday, but it was never going to be flashy footy, but you can't really excuse winning the territory battle but being smashed on the scoreboard, because that is what happened in the end. In the end, Geelong scored 57 points from their back half. We scored 10 from ours. I said that's what would decide the game, and it's exactly what happened. 47 more points from the back half, and the margin was 45. That is just exactly the reason why we lost, and why we lost by so much. Alright, now let's talk about umpiring. I don't usually say one team had the upper hand over the other. Saturday night, we were clearly a bit stiff on a few occasions, though, and that is just true. The commentators were harping on about it. It's still a discussion here on Monday. That's how you know. Even unbiased fans will agree, but you got to be a pretty silly individual to say those non-calls lost us the game. We got belted off the park in that second half. At best, a few of the decisions that went against us would have made the scoreboard look slightly better than it was. This isn't like that Adelaide game where a call genuinely could have changed the outcome. We lost by over 7 goals. I get sometimes that they came at times that changed momentum a bit, and that did happen. There were 1 or 2 calls that were really deflating for us as we were starting to play some good footy, but we just were not professional enough to get back into the game when momentum was against us. Every team in the comp gets bad calls in a game. It's a given. Only the really good teams look past it and fight their way through it. I would be a bit hesitant to say it didn't play a part in the game if it ended in a 2 or 3 goal Geelong win, but 4 or 5 bad calls do not result in a 45-point loss. It's a weak way out to just point fingers at the umpires and not our boys who couldn't find momentum consistently enough for those non-calls to be not an issue, I guess. The umps had a bad night, they'll admit that, but our night was far worse. If you're critical of the umps, I hope you're just as critical with our boys, if not more so, because our team performance was far worse than that from the blokes in green or whatever colour they're wearing now. So yes, the umps were poor, but we were far poorer. They didn't decide the game in the slightest, and if you think they did, you're missing the real issue with our club right now. The AFL isn't against us like many are saying. I actually think we're first or second on the ladder for free kicks. Fans turn a blind eye when things go our way. No one cared about the Draper dive on the footy against Adelaide. No one cared when Merritt clearly assisted Caldwell with a blatant throw last week when we were only leading by a goal. That was a momentum changer, but all of a sudden the umps lost us the game here and the comp is against us. I get the frustration. I was feeling it too. It was a tough third quarter, but blaming the umpires after we were genuinely thrashed is just a cheap way to hide the problems with the club. Speaking of poor performers, I think it's time we highlighted a few, because right now I'm looking at potential changes for our upcoming games. We have some good players in the VFL and some not so good players in the AFL right now. We'll start with the guy we might see out of the team. Harry Jones has a calf issue, which is disappointing because I was really liking him on that wing early. But other guys who could join him on the way out if he is injured. Archie Perkins, he's been really flat lately. I feel like, if we're being fair, he probably needs a rest, because looking at our last 5 or 6 games, he is more often than not in the bottom half a dozen or so players based on impact. Jai Menzie is another who could easily lose his spot to a reserves player, but I think speaking of selection, I want to talk about how tall we went into this game. It was always going to be wet. It was wet all day on Saturday. We could have made a late change. We had Hobbs and Caddy not playing in the VFL, but we still lined up with 4 or 5 players over 2 metres tall. Our sub was over 2 metres tall as well, which just makes no sense to me in those conditions. You felt like we were outrun at times. They looked like they had legs that we didn't on the rebound. That is probably because we had 11 players that were 190 centimetres or taller in wet weather footy. I just don't know if it was the night for that kind of lineup. And the real frustrating part out of this tall lineup is we went in with that tall advantage, but still got destroyed in the air. 10 contested marks to our 5. Explain that one to me, how we had half the amount of contested marks as they did, but had such a taller team. It was just annoying. I've seen many saying that Essendon have started to demand respect from the comp after our early season form. This was before the game. And yes, we're top 4. That is great. I don't think we've shown anything yet that demands respect, though, and I would have said this before the game as well. We need a statement win. So far, the best side we've beaten is GWS, and they are out of the 8. We're a good side, but we haven't shown that ability to become a great side yet. It comes as Geelong overcame their form slump to re-enter the 8 with a statement win. Freo won against the Swans in Sydney. That's a statement win. These are teams demanding respect from their performances. We had a chance to do the same on Saturday against the Cats, but we crumbled under the pressure. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened next week against the Pies and the week after against Melbourne. Right now, I look at other teams in the comp below us on the ladder and I see them doing more damage than us when it matters most. Because so far this year, we've beaten the teams we should definitely beat, and that is fantastic. It's why we're set to play finals. That is an awesome thing about the club right now, but we just haven't had a real statement win against a proper good team yet. We have big game experience, but not really that big game winning experience. Collingwood next Friday would be a perfect time to prove me wrong, but right now I'm looking at us and I'm wondering if we are really a team that can go out and win a final. And I know people will say I'm jumping the gun, but it's not the first time this year we've gone out on a big game and crumbled under the pressure. All in all, this was just a really poor night. Everything was going against us after halftime. It was one of those games where nothing really went right for us. We couldn't hit the scoreboard. We couldn't contain their attacking play. There were some deflating decisions and mistakes that we made. Geelong was simply the better team at their best. It was a tale of two halves. We grinded out a hard-fought first half, had the upper hand, and then rolled over and let the Cats play with their food. It's becoming a bit of a joke now, our form against Geelong. Even if we are the better team on paper going into the game, they somehow find a way to embarrass us. And the worst part about it was this was a night of celebration for one of our modern greats. It's typical that this was what we dished up for a guy who has had to endure a lot of these losses in his career. It's a really sour way to end what was initially a good week. The Cats win with ease. We have some problems to worry about. Let's get onto the votes. Tough night for votes. I'm going to go a bit rogue here. One vote to Ben Mackay, who I thought was our most solid defender on a night when many weren't solid. I thought Ridley was a bit low on form, Laverty, some others. He had game eye intercepts, Mackay, 4 spoils to go with it. Didn't really lose a contest. 1 bad kick, but was a brick wall down there. 2 votes to Dyson Heppell, who was one of the only boys out there showing heart in his 250th. You got to feel bad for him. But 3 votes to Caldwell. He was by far our best. 32 touches, 12 clearances, 12 tackles. He was immense, and the real difference in that midfield. My role player, I'm going to give to Peter Wright. I thought he was the only forward who looked like getting things done. He had 3 contested marks on the wet, the most on the ground, 2 goals goals. Could have had more, 15 touches, presented well, contested well. Maybe some controversial votes, but that's okay. Leave yours down in the comments below. That is that. Tough night, not a fun watch for us fans. Hopefully the boys respond against the Pies. We need a response after a pretty bad loss. If we get one, we can start to dream about being that strong footy side we want to be. If we don't, there are going to be serious question marks hovering over us. Stay tuned for my preview coming out on Wednesday, but for now, like, subscribe, and go Bombers.